I'd like the 49ers to take Carson Schwesinger with the 43rd pick in the second round, but after what he did on Wednesday, it's going to be less likely that he's available. I think this performance at his pro day in Southern California at his high school at Oaks Christian is going to make him even more attractive. He's going to be a riser. You're going to start hearing his name as a riser this week. And, I could see a team taking him at the end of the first round, a team who's got to pick at the back end of the second round. They think, well, is he really a first rounder? Maybe not. But what you hear around the draft is, okay, teams drafting in the late 20s, there's not really enough players with first round grades anyway. And so let's take a guy that we would love to have at the back of the second round who's not going to be there. Well, is this guy going to be there at 43? He's a Dre Greenlaw replacement. He's kind of, I'm not going to say, but there are some similarities here with Fred Warner. Here's what he did on Wednesday. Dane Brugler got a text from an NFL scout who gave him some of these times. I'll tell you what these times are compared to what linebackers at the combine did. His 3-cone of 7.05 would have been the second best 3-cone time at the NFL Combine, just behind Jay Higgins of Iowa at 7.01. His short shuttle of 4.25 also would be the second best time of combine performances by linebackers. And his broad jump of 10.7, 10 feet 7 inches, would be tied with Alabama's Jahad Campbell. And that's number 2 among linebackers from the combine. So this was an excellent athletic performance from Carson Schwesinger. You combine it with the fact that he's viewed, and I called several of his games this year. I called his game against Minnesota, called his game against Rutgers, called his game against somebody at Nebraska. So I called multiple UCLA. I think I called it at least one more. Fresno State, that's number 4. I did a lot of UCLA football this year. And one thing you learn about Carson Schwesinger is they love him at UCLA. He became a captain. And one of the reasons they love him is because he was a walk-on safety. Deshaun Foster, the head coach at UCLA, was a great running back as a player. And he was the running backs coach for the Bruins before he became the head coach. And when Carson Schwesinger was on the scout team at UCLA, after practices, Deshaun Foster would talk to Schwesinger and ask him to evaluate how the running backs performed in that practice. Did they hit the right hole? Did they hesitate? Did they give anything away? How'd they block? So a lot of trust from the guy who became the head coach at UCLA, who's a high-level intellectual a player, and then coach. And so Carson Schwesinger is viewed, he's very smart. He's getting a degree in bioengineering. He hangs out with the offensive linemen, okay? And he plays with fantastic instincts. And then when you look at some of his athletic scoring, now not all of these measurables, we don't have everything on here. They don't have his short shuttle. They don't have, he didn't run a 40. We don't have his 3-cone on this graphic. But if you look at, this is interesting comparisons, but number 3 on his athletic score comparison is Fred Warner. Now we see Fred off the charts on the vertical, Fred off the charts on the 3-cone. Schwesinger was off the charts on the vertical. He's not as tall as Fred Warner. His broad jump is better than Fred Warner's. Fred Warner has a better 3-cone. Fred Warner was a 6.90 to Schwesinger's 7.0. His short shuttle, Fred Warner was 4.25, Schwesinger's 4.28. So we don't know. Actually, this says we know his vertical. I don't think we know his vertical. This says we know his 39.5. I don't know where that vert came from. So I'm going to ignore that vertical for a second. Oh, yeah. He jumped 39.5 at the combine. 39.5 is actually better. Fred Warner's 38.5. So I didn't even plan on bringing the vertical in, but we've got the vertical too on Carson Schwesinger. So I think this guy's a really good fit. I think he's a very productive player like Warner. Now he transitioned to like full-time linebacker very quickly, but came in as a safety, put on weight. He's, like I say, he's not as tall as Fred, but there's something very natural about the way he plays. I think when you watch Fred and when you watch Dre Greenlaw, but when you watch Fred Warner, there is something very natural about the way he plays, how he diagnoses, how he reacts. And I think you see the same thing when you watch Carson Schwesinger. And then I add to it that I'm very familiar with him, have talked to him covering UCLA this year, know they loved him. And I think there's going to be played for a very good defensive coordinator, was asked to do a lot, and did a really good job of it. Now, here's the thing he had. UCLA, a lot of you may know if you're into the draft heavily, you may know about Oluwafemi Oladejo. I've talked about him. He's a defensive end, former linebacker turned defensive end. And a lot of people want the Niners to draft him at some point. What less people probably know about a guy I really like on UCLA's defense is their nose tackle, Jay Toia. One of the reasons that Oladejo and Schwesinger were able to put up just especially Schwesinger, just the pure tackle numbers that he did. One of the reasons was that they had a true two block eating nose tackle in Jay Toia. So the question becomes, that level of production, would it have happened on a team without as good of a nose tackle? And the answer is no. I mean, you're not going to get as many tackles if you don't have a good nose tackle. And the Niners, we don't know what they got at defensive tackle. And he played with a guy named Kane Medrano, who also tested really well at UCLA. But you put him on a team with other really productive defensive players and another really productive linebacker in Fred Warner, and I think you would see a guy who adapts quickly and still can produce at linebacker too, basically, for the 49ers. So I like him. I've liked him. I'm not surprised that he tested well. I think the best thing watching him, and I did football games. My broadcast crew was two guys who dominate film study. I mentioned Yogi Roth on the show earlier in the week. You remember that? But the other guy on our crew is Rhett Lewis, who was on NFL Network every day and played football. And he was our sideline reporter, but is every bit as qualified to be an analyst. And he grinds the tape. And, so I spent a lot of time talking to them. I spent a lot of time talking to Akaika Malloy, the defensive coordinator at UCLA, Deshaun Foster, the head coach who I mentioned. And one thing they all say about him is something I said to start the video, is his instincts. He's just so natural. And so that's the thing that I think really puts him over the top. And if you like him like I do, and you think he would be a good fit for the 49ers, like I do, your concern becomes, will he even be there with the way he's tested, the way he's definitely crushing meetings, and the way that his coaches are going to talk about him.